Today we've got Stuart on and we're talking Riku, content villain, AI, all of that fun and amazing stuff. First and foremost, Stuart, thanks for being here. I'm in the US, you're in East Asia, so I appreciate you actually taking the time to do this. I know everyone's excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm excited to share some information and give my sort of overview of where we are with AI and all of the tools and what's coming and the fun stuff that I'm working on.
Perfect. Yeah, because you've got a lot going on. And was your first product content villain in general, or did you have something before that even?
Yeah, so I've been living out in Bangkok for about 8-9 years now. What initially sort of brought me over here was to work for like a automation consultancy where we'd help businesses sort of streamline their processes and be more efficient and save money. So we'd come in and look at what they were doing, automate the hell out of it, and then crack on. AI and new technology and ways to automate are very sort of integral to being able to automate it in ways, and it's another way that you can sort of plug a system in, plug AI in as a part in that process. With regards to actually the first product that I've created with AI, it would be Content Villain. Before the pandemic, I was involved in sort of vacation rentals and Airbnb type stuff. Had quite a large business where we were sort of selling and promoting a lot of properties across Southeast Asia. And originally I wanted to bring AI into that, but then the pandemic happened. That business sort of had a bit of issues during the pandemic, which hasn't really recovered. So Content Villain was really like a pivot and a way to sort of try and plug in AI in a unique sort of way and try and build a new writing assistant which did things a little bit differently with a focus on integration and automation. So that's what we tried to do.
And literally a year ago, I don't know exactly when I picked up Content Villain. I know I made a video on the channel 9 months ago, but a year ago, give or take, I picked up Niches was my first product with it, and I love the prompts it spits out. Like, it was just the personality of it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Today, I can't even imagine, because so many people still don't know AI tools in general, even though Jarvis, Conversion AI, Jasper now, their marketing's expanded the reach to the market, you know? But with that said, I went from Niches and then I got a couple others, and then I was like, maybe this is kind of the thing. And Content Villain, when I made that, you had just moved from the chatbot interface to like the red and black interface with the webhooks and everything. Fast forward to today, you're with Riku now. And to me, not to take anything away from Content Villain, but what Riku's doing is unique to anything I've ever seen. However, I do think it takes probably a bit of a learning curve. For that, it's not as approachable.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand sort of what sort of happened with Content Villain in regard to sort of the many iterations that we've done. Like, obviously, we started out with the chatbot because that was pretty much MVP, trying to get something to market, see what people liked about it. And then we got asked to make it sort of spit out multiple generations and make it easier to even send those generations to wherever anyone needed it to go. We created something new, built it into like a web app format, and then from that iteration, a lot of people were asking for more of like a long form writing assistant. We sort of moved across as based on feedback with regards to that. And as we build out sort of prompts and models for Content Villain, and as more and more different technologies came onto the market, because a year ago, you really were only able to use OpenAI because that was all that was available. And that was a private beta. So you were lucky if you had access to that, because, I waited like 9 months.
And I remember when that was going on, like with some of the initial people getting access, it was a big deal. And then 4, 5, 6 months later, I don't remember exactly the timeline when they kind of opened it up more so, but that's when the real flood hit the market. Now, I mean, I bet there's 10 AI writers in the marketplace. And I get emails like more than you would expect for my channel. It's not that big. Asking, hey, what about this one? What about that one? And it's like, they're all, for lack of a better thing, they're the same. Now the outputs vary greatly, but once you kind of learn how to manipulate telling it what you want and getting something, you can use most of them effectively. And enter Riku, this time instead of me having to guess what to give it, because the first 2-3 days before I make a video on an AI tool, I'm sitting there and I'm trying to like, what do I have to say for this thing to spit something out that I can use?
Riku was really sort of built with two things in mind. One, because there's so many sort of technologies available now. You haven't just got OpenAI, you've got AI21, you've got Cohere, you've got the Alufa models, you've got some other open source models. To actually build out prompts, you'd have to go to each site, go and try it out in a playground, have all the settings, and then some of them don't even have a way for you to save anything there. So you can do that in AI21, and then you have the prompt, and what do you do with it? You can either copy it to a text file or you put it somewhere and it gets lost, right? So with Riku, for me, I wanted a central place where I could actually store everything that I've created. So I've actually got it there, and there's a record of it, and it's an easy place, so I can look and I can improve things as we go. So that was one problem that I wanted to solve with it. And the second problem was, like you say, there's so many writing assistants coming out, and there's a lot of interest in this space, and you tend to find that a lot of consumers will be looking and keep buying more and more of these content writing assistants, which is great if you're selling them. But you've got to ask yourself, why do people keep buying the latest one? What are they not getting solved from the ones that they've already bought? And the feedback that I've sort of seen and sort of witnessed online and have feedback from content villain users is, yeah, it's great. It's providing content in the area that I want it to, but it's not super specific to my needs. And I'd love to have something super specific. And you're just not going to get that with a writing assistant, because the way that you are going to train the prompts and the data sets is you want to make it as generic as possible. In a way, you want to provide examples from a wide variety of different businesses and different industries, so that when a user comes from X industry, they'll get an output which is generally relevant. And if another one comes from a completely different industry, they're again going to get something which is generally relevant. But it's a trade-off, because you're getting the generally relevant compared to ultra-specific, which you can only get if you actually go in and modify the prompts yourself. Riku allows that, and that's really the power.
A lot of times in my videos, I try to keep things moving. And part of the reason is I'm trying to show the tool in a way that can be digested quicker than other videos on the platform. But also, how boring is it when you're looking at these different tools, particularly the AI writers, and they're spitting out the same generic prompts? And you're like, the truth is, what the consumer wants, from my opinion, versus what they're getting right now, the consumer's lazy. They want a push button, like, give me a blog article that I can then make $100 a day on, and I don't want to have to do anything. And the writing assistant, the whole concept of it is, hey, I got stuck here, I need some help, and it provides the assistance.
Yeah, one important thing to sort of note about writing assistants and sort of how to use them best. If you're a bad writer and you think that a writing assistant is going to solve your problem and make you into a good writer, then you're not going to have much success, because a bad writer using a writing assistant is still going to be a bad writer. It's not a silver bullet to get optimized content straight out, and there's always going to be a process of editing and refining the content. And I think when you use a writing assistant, you got to think about it in that way. It's a way to keep things flowing. It's a way for you to keep writing and keep ideas on a page, but ultimately you're going to iterate on what comes out, and you're going to have to add to it and edit it to get it to a point where you have really great content. If you're just looking for creating content to rank robots, and you don't expect anyone to actually read it, then sure, you can get some generic stuff out and you can put it out, but don't expect anyone to actually see that and think, oh, it's great content. And
OpenAI used to have a very confined, I remember they couldn't have but so much output. And now, I mean, there's tools that I press a button and it's giving me 800 words. Or like one tool that I just covered, it gave me 1,200 words. I cut out, I went through and edited it, refined it, and 600-700 were workable. I mean, like, the rest was complete gibberish, but the 700, it's still quicker. I pressed a button and I got 700 words. So did they change something, or is that using a different API?
Yeah, so OpenAI haven't changed anything in that terms, and even Cohere have similar terms saying that you can't really create such long content in a single sort of button press. But you can do so if you're using any of the open source models. Open source models are like the Wild West because there's no rules, because you can host them yourself. So you can do exactly what you want with them, and nobody's going to tell you something's bad.
They're fairly new to market, the open source.
Yeah, so the open source stuff is pretty good, but tends to be lesser parameters because, like the biggest OpenAI model is 175 billion, and the biggest sort of open source was GPT-J, which was like 6.7 billion, and then NeoX, which is released sort of a couple of weeks ago, which is now 20 billion. But that's so new that people are still sort of figuring out how to optimize the hosting for it, how to effectively run it. That's the other issue you have with open source. Because the models are so big, they take up so much computer power. It's not easy and it's not cheap to actually have those models running. But over time, I expect that problem to be solved. There are ways to do it with open source, or you could even use like AI21 for it. I put out a beta version of a full blog writer and content building a few months ago, where we literally just provided 2 examples of blogs within the prompt. From that, you could get the third output, which is actually going to be your blog. The problem we had with that was, well, it worked, but it worked about 80% of the time because some of the times it was trying to pull in more tokens than was allowed. Because of the way their system works, that just made an error. So it was erroring a lot more than usual. And some of the outputs were hit and miss because there was only 2 examples. That prompt I put on Riku, so it's open for anyone to actually look at if you want to look at it.
I played around with it. I actually got something that was workable from it. In one go.
So that's sort of something that you can do. And since then, what we've done is we actually collected a couple of 1,000 examples of blog posts, put them into a proper data set, and then fine-tuned a model with AI21. So instead of having 2 examples in the back end, we've got a couple of 1,000. Through the fine-tuning process, you get something which is a lot more concrete and a lot more stable. Instead of having to put the 2 examples in the prompt, we just have to write the blog based on this blog title, and then we say what token we want. And instead of maxing it out, now we have plenty of space, so now it will work 100% of the time. And that's live in content building, and that's a pretty powerful data set and a use case for doing these things. And it's, I think bringing it back to a sort of writing assistant conversation, I think personally you're pretty foolish if you're trying to run a writing assistant tool and you're not playing with multiple technologies, because you're just limiting what you can actually do. At the end of the day, you want to make a tool that works best for your customers. And if somebody asks for something and you're like, we can't do that because our partner says we can't do it, then it's like, well, are you going to look for a solution or not? It seems lazy not to.
One of my questions on that, which is a bit, out of left field, but not to put any particular tool on the spot, but in general, with all of them hitting the market as lifetime deals, and then with me playing around with Riku, which you kind of poured in your API, or I don't know the correct term for that, but you attach your API, and then it's like, how sustainable is the business model for some of these? Like, is it almost like they're capitalizing in on the fad right now, and they don't anticipate, they realized that, hey, people are just buying these. Like they have 15 of them, create it, and then in a year they'll be on to something else, and I won't have to support this tool. Or is that rampant, or is that just rare?
Well, I'd say it's definitely, last year was a bit of a gold rush for these tools, and there was a lot of people bringing these tools out, and it seemed like an easy way to sort of create some money and some cash flow. You can't really frown on anyone doing that because it was a pretty obvious playbook to do. But then, as with anything, it's about vetting who you should buy from and what the future looks like. And if they seem to be passionate about the field and actually looking to push updates constantly, or whether they just sort of done it, their communication hasn't been so good, their updates are pretty lackluster, and they don't really have a plan for the future. It's fairly easy to do a bit of due diligence on that and decide where to put your money and whether you think that it's a tool that you should invest in or whether it's a tool that you don't think you should invest in. I've seen one of the deals which ended, I think, in December, and the founder's already quit and updated his LinkedIn to be working somewhere else. And, I don't want to name the tool, but yeah,
you're not going to get much support out of that.
Do that, like, whilst it's still in the refund period, and it's just crazy. It's like it's been abandoned now, and there's always going to be people looking to take advantage. And I think it's up to consumers to really try and drill down into who they're buying from and trying to understand: is this guy going to stick it out? Is he going to support this tool, or is he not? And
like with Content Villain, it has seen the most improvements of any tool from where I got it to today.
Yeah, I think we started at quite a low bar, which the way the chatbot looked, it was pretty. What's the word? It was.
I thought it was actually quite cool, but it's practical.
It was a unique sort of work on it, but it wasn't as polished as a lot of the others, and it's just it's a case of sort of constantly polishing and trying to make it better. And ultimately, the way that I see the AI landscape is I'm going to continue to be trying to create new things because I see the potential to put this in sort of every single business. And I'm a firm believer that this technology will probably be within sort of every business in America by 2030, if not sooner. So the more I can experiment, and if I can experiment with Riku and then push models to Content Villain and have my own sort of playground and bring a bunch of people along for the ride who are using the tools as well, then all the better. It's really about if you have an interest in the space, if you're trying to make relevant content, and I think I can help you. But there's other tools on the market that focus specifically more on SEO and that type of stuff, which I really don't have an interest in doing. I make that clear. It's, I'm focusing on the AI side of things and trying to create the best stuff with AI and not trying to integrate that with SEO within the tools that I create.
I almost wonder if SEO I've never been good with. And every time I try something, and part of the reason is I truly believe I'm not consistent. I get bored writing the articles. I get bored with this stuff. And with the YouTube channel, I had a period of 6-7 months, not too long after my Content Villain video, where I got busy with life and stuff, and I didn't have the time, even though almost every day when I was away from the channel, I thought about it. And when you're playing around with the AI tools, or you're trying to work through problems, one of the latest tools that I think just absolutely, there's 2 tools that are changing the game right now, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that because you're here, but it's Riku and then it's Cheat Layer. Because what Cheat Layer is trying to do with, again, I'm not a coder, I'm not good with the interface. I think they're going to have significant problems, which they're solving with the boot camp right now. But the learning curve is so big, it's almost daunting. But what they're doing can't be understated, because it probably is the future as far as actually using this artificial intelligence to write some code that we no longer have to type. Just like you said it, by 2030, you can pick a date. I'm obviously from a position where I speak English. I was raised in America, so I take it all for granted as far as the writing in English. Spanish and other languages that I look at, even though they make more sense to the rest of the world, I can't understand the grammar. You know what I mean? Like all of that. So I can only imagine when you're used to that kind of system, an AI writer can actually probably solve some problem there. And that isn't getting the appropriate focus probably, as far as that would be something that to me would improve everything. Someone can maybe plug in something. And this, I don't know what are your thoughts? Do you think Riku could solve that kind of situation where maybe like you don't speak English natively, so you say this, you know what you want it to say, you just don't know how to say it?
There are ways to build a prompt that will just sort of like fix grammar and make it change sort of the layout of the text to make sense, fix any spellings, put the punctuation in the right place, that sort of thing. Another thing that I think is fairly interesting is there are more models focusing on other parts of the world, which we want to integrate with Riku. At the moment, we have a French model already on the platform, a model called Boris, which is just like a very fine-tuned version of GPT-J, specifically for French language, which performs really, really well. So whilst there is ways to help with English speaking and to make that easier for people who don't necessarily speak the language so well, there are other options for, other languages, and even there's a model out of China which is called Wudao, which is like ridiculously big. It's bigger than Da Vinci or anything that OpenAI have ever created. But obviously the barrier to using that model is quite high because it's all a Chinese website. And, if you want to experiment with it, you need to figure out how to actually sign up, register, get the code, do all of this. So that's another thing that we want to bring to Riku, because we just want to bring everything into one place to give people the ability to try and actually learn from all of this stuff. And what you find is, because a lot of these language models are drawing on such large data sets, that even though they're specifically focused on one language, they tend to perform relatively well across a wide spectrum of languages, because they would have just picked up that data within their training sort of by accident, but it gives them quite good understanding and ability to perform in those languages. Like, for example, if you were to use like OpenAI's Da Vinci and actually just write French to it in a prompt, then you'd probably get French out to quite a high level as well. So it's not necessarily that you can only use English for an English model, or you could only use French for a French model. It's all about.
I did that on my channel a couple times last year. I fed it, like someone would email me and say, "Hey, does it support this language?" And I would actually go to Google Translate and I would take something and I would feed it, and then I'd be like, "Here's what it spits out." You tell me. If you look 20 years down the road, no one could have seen the past 3 years the way they developed. So we can't see 20 years out. Yet, at some point, it's likely through artificial intelligence or through just the human experience, the fact that like Web 2, Web 3, whatever iteration comes beyond that, people are going to learn how to communicate deeper and better, because you can have, in my opinion, a more authentic relationship with someone when you share like-minded things, and we're no longer confined to geographical locations. I'm outside of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where I guarantee most people don't know about AI things in general. Like it's a slower lifestyle. To me, the internet solves, as far as being able to connect with people. Language being a big barrier, AI will definitely solve it. I'm curious as to how and at what point, based on just where we are today, how much from the last year to today it's changed like crazy. But do you think that from today to next year, when this video comes up on my timeline and reminds me, is it going to be like just twice as much as the past year? Or is it going to be even like, is it going to get compounding higher each year? Or do you think we're going to level off with the AI writers and move on to like the pictures and other stuff?
I think there's definitely room for improvement across the board, but I think we're sort of in a place at the moment where the technology is limited by the computer power and the expenses of actually training these massive models. Because to train something like OpenAI's Da Vinci, or even the Neo X model that just came out, the 20 billion open source one, you're looking at multiple weeks running on multiple GPUs, which costs, a ridiculous amount per hour. So you times that by what it costs to actually train the model, and you're getting to a crazy amount of cost. So that's quite a prohibitive factor to where we are, because to get the models to a bigger level than they are, you need to chuck so much computing power at it. Well, you need to have the backing to do that, which is why, you know, you see OpenAI getting quite cozy with Microsoft, because Microsoft can give them that. Cohere have a deal with Google. They're very close with Google, which helps them to do it. Riku.ai just trained their newest model with CoreWeave, who have their whole company is providing GPUs and servers and stuff like that. That's one thing to keep in mind. And then the second thing to keep in mind is when you're actually hosting such a model, to have the computer power to run it as an API service. So for example, Content Villain, when you hit generate, we're sending an API call to that service and they're sending the response back. The larger the model, the more power is needed to run multiple calls at the same time, and that gets quite expensive. The larger the model, the longer it can take to send that response back, which is why you can see, you know, if you're testing out multiple models, you'll see if you use GPT-J, it'll be a lot snappier than if you use DaVinci, for example, just purely because it's a smaller model, so it takes less time. So it's all about weighing these things up and thinking, okay, if we're going to make something bigger, there's going to be a trade-off in actually the response rate of making the calls, and is that worth it at the time? Or have we got to a point where the model size is not the problem, maybe it's a data set, and maybe we could improve that area compared to actually just making more and bigger and ever bigger models. Perhaps we can go in and train it better, optimize it better, put more relevant data in to get what we need out. That's really what's going to be the focus. There's a lot of talk about GPT-4 and what they could be doing with GPT-4 and all of this, making like this mega monster model. But I think a lot of the processes and the way things are looking currently is more towards optimizing what's already there, putting in better data and just sort of making it perform better based on, you know, making the benchmarks better that it's already at. So for a year outlook, I think you're more likely to see those sort of incremental improvements compared to a massive step forward. But I think 2 to 3 years, you're probably going to see that bigger step forward, just with the way that computing is accelerating and keeps accelerating with, you know, processors and GPUs and all of this stuff getting faster and faster and better. It will be able to support much bigger models. But at the moment, I think that's pretty much the limiting factor. You're more so limited by the computing power than you are what people are building currently.
That's interesting because you do see all the talk. At least I do. I'm not a very tech person, but I look at the stuff. All I see these days is Web3, metaverse, this, that. Elon Musk saying fairly soon you're going to have the stuff with the contact lenses or they'll fix Parkinson's with the implant in the brain, like stuff like that, and quicker than anyone anticipates. Is if you're going to do all those things, you do have to fix the hardware, the processing of the. And writing does feel like a great first step, but it feels like a very ground level first step. Nothing, whatever the next virtual reality is, we better figure out the writing stuff first. Riku, I've had insane results. I mean, it's mostly because I think I'm looking at it, and maybe you can explain how this is actually working. When I'm giving it 3 prompts, and then for whatever reason, it spits something that's quite comparable to it. Like, what's going on there?
So really, with the text-based AI models that are available, it's mainly just about patterns, right? So you teach it a pattern and it will follow the pattern. And the more thorough you are with reinforcing that pattern, the better it's going to be, which is why you're saying, okay, I'm giving it 3 examples and it's giving me something relevant out as the fourth output. It's pretty much the way it works. Let's not try and make it more complicated than it needs to be. One, you can give it an instruction at the top, which we like to do, like create a blog in the style of Seth Godin or whatever, which is what you've done. And then you go input, so you say what you want to put in. You give it one example, you give it the second example, you give it the third. Maybe you want to give it a fourth, fifth, sixth. It's really based on, managing the tokens and trying to get everything correct. You toggle some of the settings, the temperature and stuff. You make it as creative as you want it to be, and then you can hit generate. And it's not more complicated than that, really. And it's just a case of being able to play with all of the different models to get something that makes sense for you and an output that you like, because all of these models are sort of trained on different things and different sizes, and I like to think of it as they all have their own unique personality in a way. They're all capable of creating something. It's about looking at the one that creates the best content for you, and that's something that we try to do with Riku, just to make that switching between each model as seamless as possible for experimenting like that.
So do you think giving it more prompts helps it? And also, is giving it more prompts more expensive because of the tokens?
Yeah, so the more, how most of the AI technologies work is that they count the prompt as a token amount, and they count the output as a token amount, and you're charged for both. So if you have a maxed out prompt, it's going to be more expensive than if you just had one or two examples. So it's a way to cut costs, right? And it's a way, whilst, I see a lot of comments for people asking questions of various writing assistants saying, oh, what technology are you using? What technology are you using? What model are you using? And that's not the be all and end all, because you could say, oh yeah, I'm using DaVinci, but then it's like, okay, you might be using DaVinci, but you might just be providing one example. Whereas if I use a different model and I provide 6 or 7 examples, I'm probably going to get a better output because I've reinforced the pattern better and I've taught it what I want it to do. Whereas, the one example is not. So there's a trade-off there, and it's a very easy question just to ask, but it just shows a bit of understanding about sort of what's going on in the back end, really. So that's generally how most of the models work. AI21 is a bit different. The way that they've done their pricing is that they only charge for the output tokens. So it makes sense for you to provide as much as you want with AI21 because you're not getting charged for it. And it's quite an interesting model that they've done for that. And it's one of the reasons why I like to use AI21 for actually like a long form writing assistant, because you're not taking the text that is in the long form content into account when you're doing the output. You're only getting charged for the stuff that it writes. And AI21 tends to have slightly different token structure, so it tends to be able to have more words in the prompt than any other model, just by the way they built it. So you get more context. You can sort of put like up to 2,500 odd words within the prompt, whereas other models wouldn't allow such a high amount.
That's good to know, because a lot of what I here's my core thesis. Tell me if I'm crazy. The whole concept, like, there is no such thing as an original idea. It's just everyone's duplicating one another. Well, to me, to make the most out of these tools is teaching myself, because I can't say that I'm necessarily good at it, but teaching myself how to spot the pattern. So like what I noticed about Seth Godin, he does the daily ritual and he takes the sentence and then he tends to write about it. And then what he tends to try to do, which I think is to provoke response, and then he assesses it on Twitter and otherwise, he tries to be a little contrarian with the message, but he tries to essentially say something and then he tries to kind of hammer home the point, and then he tries to kind of give you a little, I don't know like what the word is, but friction perhaps, and then conclude it in a way that makes you think differently. At least that's the way that I read it. So if you spot that pattern and then you can train AI to do that pattern, then one, you can look a lot smarter than you are, which is what I'm about. And then two, you can actually have some decent outputs that are more thought-provoking. My point is, if we can spot the patterns in regular pieces of content that people are successful with, then I think we can build prompts that what makes them work.
It's one of the best things to do, right? Like you can just borrow from already successful people and use what they've got. Like last night, I was focusing on trying to build out a couple of Amazon models because we just launched something called prompt chaining, which is pretty cool, and I wanted to create something where we could feed in a bunch of Amazon stuff at the same time, just to get like, you can launch a whole new product just by hitting one generate button. So I was thinking, okay, so how, I don't know much about Amazon, I'm not into selling products on Amazon. How would I get the data that I need to get these prompts together? So I was like, okay, I know that the bullet points on Amazon are very important from SEO perspective and also gaining people's attention. So I literally went to Google and was like, examples of best Amazon bullet points. And then an article came up saying, here are 8 of the best Amazon listings, ever, sort of thing. So I was like, oh, great. Now I've got 8 examples. I can go in, I can just copy the stuff, put it in the prompt, and it works pretty well. So, that's pretty much what I use for all of the Amazon prompts that I put up last night. So it's easy to sort of, let's not try and reinvent the wheel. Let's borrow from stuff that works and create something useful for ourselves as business people.
Well, that's like Naval on Twitter. I read a lot of that, and that was one of my ideas. I was like, I'm going to create, and then I go in there, and you've already done it. Output there, and I'm like, thought. It's conscious thought. It's someone that takes the time to think that, oh yeah, we're multi-complex. Everything's complex. Everything's nuanced. You say things that you shouldn't say in certain areas, and it's fine in others, and all these different rules to society. And there's some people that navigate the vernacular of it better than others. And we live in a world now where they will cancel you for anything. So to me, it's a matter of like looking at the people that are very calculated with what they say and then emulating that, not just because like some of it might be being lazy. Like, I would like to write like Seth Godin and be a genius marketer and whatever, right? Like some of it might be that, but more than that, I think it's about training my brain that, hey, this is this and that. And then that's kind of rewiring the way that maybe I approach a problem or think about something. And the process of prompt building through Riku is going to be like, it's a scenario in which I think, and one of my questions beyond this is I could seriously build out a database of, 50 to 100 different types of, things like Seth Godin blog. And what would I then be best served as far as doing with it? Like, what are your plans to expand the tool? Because I do think from even if you don't use the tools, like sometimes I'll make videos and I buy pretty much every single product that I cover, and it's not sustainable. I'm more fascinated in taking something like Riku, taking something like Cheat Layer, and building as a non-technical, just a regular person that can barely type, building something that is a business. It's more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like tangible, you know what I mean? Like it's not just, like AI writers are a dime a dozen. Like one of my original thoughts, and then it was very short-lived. I said, well, these AI writers, I bet you could like join some freelancer sites and blog and do pretty well because you can just spit out 500-word articles like this.
Yeah, I've had that thought as well. Like when after launching Content Villain, I was talking with a buddy of mine, and he was like, you know what you should do? You should start buying up blogs. You should start buying up blogs and just sort of ramming home content on them and seeing how you perform. And it's a very interesting concept, but it's a distraction from what I wanted to do. So it's, I can see somebody doing that and being very successful because you can just hit all of the keywords and churn out content very quickly. But it wasn't for me.
It's not sustainable either, or at least like what motivates you, what motivates me. I like woke up and I don't recognize celebrities anymore. I don't recognize people with like 50 million followers. It used to be like, oh, you got 500,000 followers. Okay, maybe I don't know every single person. Now it's like, there's all of them. I'm like, who are these people? My whole point of that is literally in the world, there's so much noise. And when AppSumo is fantastic. I think I've seen they've now got 1.25 million subscribers or customers, or to some extent. So like, that's a massive business. And being on there, you can probably speak to that from a creator standpoint. The exposure that you get is probably pretty real, but with what they did last year, they sunk so much money into expanding the marketplace. It's so much noise now.
Yeah, there's so much stuff there now, and there's a lot of junk there as well, which is why, I feel it's important that people do their due diligence and actually understand what a tool is, what their purpose for being there is, because I've seen tools on the marketplace that are actually on another website for sale already, and it's like, why would you buy that if somebody's just trying to offload it already? So you've definitely got to be careful, and there's people changing deal terms midway through and stuff like that, and people who are like quitting the project even before like the refund period is up and stuff like that. And I think for that, absolutely, I should just say, you're obviously not in it for the long term. We're just going to cut this product, refund everyone, and say, sorry, and you're not going to get any money from us. That would be the way to do it. It's, it protects the customer and all of that. So that's the way that I feel. But yeah, it's a great launching point to get some initial users and get some initial sort of traction. And it's good because the customers ask a lot of questions. And
the super links are fantastic. It's what my channel didn't start out to be that. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew for a fact when I started aiPROFITz, I took it was called a 7-day challenge. It was this thing like you build a YouTube channel, right? And the whole thing was taking action every single day for 7 days. And at the end of it, you got a channel with some videos on it and everything else, mostly focused on affiliate marketing and stuff. You go out and get a tool like Elementor, and then you just make 5-minute training videos on Elementor, essentially. And when I came in to the AppSumo ecosystem, which I think I'd been a part of it for a while, but I hadn't really been a part of it. I came into it because I won, like the webcam that I'm talking to you on, the microphone, I won it in one of their giveaways. Like I woke up one morning and it's like, you won. And I was like, what did I win? Because they do these giveaways at like probably about once a quarter, where they give away like $2,500 worth of stuff, and I actually won. And it was right at this time. It just couldn't have been more like serendipitous. And I was like, wow. I actually reached out to the partner, coordinated all of because it was shipped from different vendors and stuff, coordinated it all. And I was like, hey, by the way, I applied to the affiliate program and I just have a brand new YouTube channel. It's got like 30 subscribers, maybe. Like they had nothing. I was like, I got declined, but I'd really like to make some videos. And they actually let me in. Sumo's fantastic and the community's amazing. And it has one big negative, which is also what makes it such a success. And that's that they're so effective at marketing a variety of products that perhaps not that practical to apply to our daily lives or businesses, but one day we might need them. So let's go ahead and scoop it up on the lifetime deal. That's kind of where does someone start? Like, because we buy the tools and we get in there and then we're like, it's not giving me what I want. Well, now with Riku, I can speak with 100%, honesty and say, it may not give you what you want, but you can actually train it to give you a pretty similar thing. I mean, you can get it if you stick with it.
So like with Riku, like we have plans to obviously keep improving it. Like the community showcase is only going to grow and get bigger and bigger. So there's going to be more and more ready-made prompts that you can use and edit and modify for your needs. Because if someone else has created a prompt which you like the look of, you're getting sort of good results with, but you'd want to get better results with, you can just go in and edit that, swap out the examples for stuff that you already have, save it to your account, and then you have something really good. Well, with what we've added with prompt chaining now, that opens up a whole new world because you can run multiple prompts one after the other. And
I saw that. It just came out today, and I haven't made a video on it yet, but I was trying to put together like my idea. It's not fully refined yet, but that's a game changer with what it's, because you can, like you said, with launching an Amazon product, like with that, you may have to do a couple of versions of it or whatever, but like it's going to save you a ton of time. Unique to anything.
I decided to make a few more videos on that as well. And I think the initial sort of launch I showcased, like sequential. So you're using a prompt to get a blog title, and then you're feeding the output from that first prompt into the full blog writer to get a full chunk of text just from like an idea. You don't even have to title, and it's writing you the full thing. And again, like with what we've done with like the static prompt chaining, which is where you just have multiple prompts running on the same inputs. So you can have the same, like product name, product title, and you can run that across, Amazon bullet points, Amazon title, product description, like a lengthy product description, and like a cheerleader type post where somebody's saying how much they love your product, which you can use, where you want it. And you just hit one button and you get all of that output, and it's there. And you could put that and you chuck that into Amazon and you have your launch ready to go. That's very cool to us to have. We're looking to launch fine-tuning within the platform so you can actually work on larger data sets and put that in to get even more incredible results. But I think, a lot of it's about understanding our audience. We're trying to help people who probably taken their first steps into AI to get more comfortable with it. And I think, having the prompts is quite a learning curve as it is. So it's just about, for us, it's about trying to educate and give people the tools they need to succeed, but not trying to overwhelm people all at once. So with fine-tuning, there's another whole step because you've got to format the data very particularly. And we're going to be sort of trying to introduce that as delicately and sort of in a way that doesn't turn people off. And I think the long game with Riku and what we'd love to be able to do down the road and what we're hoping to have one day is for literally to turn everything that you have in Riku within your own account and choosing any prompts that you like from the showcase and turning it into your own sort of white labeled writing assistant that you could use across your organization or offer to other people to use as well. But that's sort of like way down the road. So we're working on sort of optimizing the prompts.
You provide the code right now. So in theory, someone could take that and hire a developer. Yeah. But then they would have to go through the process of getting approved from OpenAI or whoever they're using as far as actually fueling it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, I mean, that's a situation where I know there's a lot of self-starting entrepreneurs. I don't think I'm one of those. And are you? Do you have developers? Or are you the developer? Are you doing all of the?
I do most of the development stuff, but it's quite interesting because I'm not from a technical background at all. I don't code, so everything that is with Riku and with Content Villain is built with like no code tools. I'm very good at being able to use APIs and mash stuff together. Like I was a Zapier expert on their program when they first launched that, and then I was an Integromat partner with those guys as well, and I started to play around with N8N a lot more. So it's all of these sort of tools where you can sort of mash stuff together as a backend. It works the same with like Pabbly and Integrately, which I guess people from AppSim will probably be more familiar with. There's a lot of interesting things that you can create if you just sort of learn the stuff. And I'm not saying it's easy to learn the stuff, but I think that's another advantage of what I'm trying to do with AI, because I'm not a technical person. I try and explain things, and I try and give people the knowledge that they need in a way that I understand it. I try and deliberately avoid going into more technical terms and using code and stuff, because that's not the way that I'd want to know it. So I think that's quite valuable for people who are trying to take their first steps into this stuff.
And do you think over time, like, what would you put on a timeline, like as far as someone that's just like, maybe they bought, because a lot of people probably that are watching this video have bought some AI writers, whether it be Content Villain or 50 others through AppSumo or otherwise. And at what point, like if they were to pick up Riku today, would they feel comfortable using it and doing it?
If somebody's using a writing assistant, why would they maybe consider getting Riku? I think the way that you'd look at that is to say, are you getting what you want out of the writing assistant? Is it giving you the content that you like? If you are, great. You don't need Riku. If you're looking for something more specific and able to have sort of full control over what you're creating, then Riku can definitely help you with that. And then in terms of how fast someone would be able to start seeing success with Riku after sort of getting it, there is a little bit of a learning curve, but I think if you look at the Riku YouTube channel, then there are a couple of videos where we go through some stuff. I think your video as well, the Seth Godin walkthrough, is very good at sort of helping people understand just sort of how to structure things. And just by looking at the community showcase and some of the stuff that's there, you can get a grasp quite quickly and start to edit things. I think
I actually learned a lot from the help guides too.
Yeah, once you understand the basic sort of concepts and the way that it works with patterns and everything, it's very easy to sort of start building successfully. So Riku and Content Villain and feeding from one to the other, I built a personal integration for myself, so I can push my own models across into Content Villain for everyone else, which is the initial idea that I've had. And I've had messages from other users who want to do similar. We're working on bringing that to life. The only issue that we have with that is obviously if they've created something with OpenAI in Riku, then we need to do an approval process. So we'd love it just to be like a one-click button, bang, it's in Content Villain, which we can do pretty much for everything else except OpenAI. But the OpenAI stuff's a bit of a different challenge, so we need to figure that out before we can sort of make something more widespread. But it's definitely on the radar to make it easier for people to move stuff across and have that in their accounts.
Are you going to improve the Riku overall front end, or are you just going to treat it more like a back end and then focus on the ways?
It's gonna be more like a back end. Like obviously you've got to
like,
take
I don't want that to sound negative. I don't mean it negative. I mean it like
no.
I mean?
I get it, and it's something to consider, and I definitely see, like I've had feedback from people saying, oh, you've abandoned Content Villain, you've moved on to a new project. And it really is a back end in that side of things. It's a way for me to produce things and push it into Content Villain. Content Villain's not going anywhere. We're going to keep improving it. But then, you've got to balance that up. And it's like, do we want to make Riku more of a front-end tool? And not really, because, I'd say to people, if you want a front-end tool, then go to Content Villain. If you want a back-end tool for experimenting and being able to build stuff, then use Riku. I've got no intentions of making them something that compete with each other, because it's, what's the point in making two products that are the same? So we're going to keep them separate in that regard. I think what we will be doing with Riku, which is, very later down the road, no sort of time frame on this, but we are looking at ways to give people like a white labeled writing assistant solution for their own stuff. But that's sort of like concept. We're just sort of like thinking and structuring how the best way to do that would be at the moment.
So we'll wrap things up, because I do want to be respectful of your time, but I want to conclude with like how, as someone that is like, maybe I give the appearance off. In a way I try to, in a way I don't. Like I try to be 100% authentic with my verbiage, but with aiPROFITz in general, I'm fascinated with this space. Like I really am. I think about it a lot. What resources can I get more knowledgeable? Because before Riku, I didn't know what Cohere was. OpenAI was about it. And then I knew there were other stuff, but what can I do? What can people like me that are interested in this space?
What I tend to find myself doing is hanging about in quite a few different Discord communities, and also visiting forums fairly regularly. Like the OpenAI forum is good for some. Aloofa AI have a really good Discord, which is really quite high level, quite nerdy, quite geeky, like higher level, really like drilling into a lot of the technical stuff behind AI models. There's also, I like to look at what Novel AI are doing, which is a company that focuses on like story and fiction, because they've got some really smart people running that, and they're really into fine-tuning data sets and actually providing some really interesting models. And I think they are ahead of everyone else in terms of what they're doing in that regard, just with the technical knowledge that they have. So I keep an eye on them. You know, it's a bunch of these different Discord communities I sort of keep an eye on, and then Twitter as well. Just tend to follow all of the major technologies and some of the founders of those companies as well. As things sort of continue to progress, we're going to be adding more content, obviously, to Riku. We're just setting up a chat at the moment with one of the main guys out of Cohere to do a session on sort of prompt building and best practices using Cohere and how we can sort of implement that in Riku. So that's going to be exciting to, you know, give people a bit more knowledge about what they do and how you can get the best out of their software. And I think it's a really exciting time to be in AI because there's so much sort of development happening all the time. Cohere just announced literally today, I just read the article before this, that they just raised another 125 million. So there's not small money in this. Like there's a lot of money, there's a lot of smart people, and there's a lot of driven people driving this space forward. So it's super exciting.
That's why I think personally you need a balance of people like me and then really smart people. So I'm happy to be here along for the ride, and I appreciate you actually taking the time, because it's not only been incredibly helpful for me, I hope that it's communicated some of your ideas, your thoughts, where Riku is, where Content Villain is as well, where it's come from in particular and where it's headed. Because you've done, of all the founders, I haven't used Content Villain the most. I can't say that I've been like the absolute biggest pusher of it, but at the same time, it's been probably one of the better tools that I've looked at, and it's by far, of all the founders, you've been the most active, friendly, and thank you, Stuart. No problem. Get out of here now. Smash the like button, everyone. Leave a comment down below. Stuart will answer anything you got, and we'll see you in the next one.